very interesting talks. It's good to see these kind of conferences happening here. I'm brand new to Gurgaon, by the way. I just moved a couple of weeks ago. But it's nice to see these conferences happening. Great list of speakers. And hopefully a lot of 10x software engineers in the room. Right? Now, when I was first told about the topic of the talk, I was intrigued. 10x software engineer is kind of an interesting term, right? So can somebody help me here? What would the definition for such a term be? By the way, I like to interact with them. So, I used to teach. Somebody? Yeah?
Okay, I think a software engineer who's looking for to kind of contribute in other ways just rather than just programming. So that's a 10x software. Basically 10x of a software engineer.
So 10 times a software engineer, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm an engineer who knows what are the right tools, what are the ways to get more things done in a better way, in, let's say, lesser time. So he would, so to speak, be more productive.
A more productive software engineer. Excellent. Anybody else? So as an engineer, when I first saw 10x, I was like, well, what's the base number? Right? What's 1x? It was not clear to me. Right? Is it a fresher? Is it somebody who's an average engineer? How do you quantify something like that? We've all done appraisals, and boy, you know, they are indeed subjective, right? So it's a very difficult term, and I think it's debated quite a bit. I did some research on the net. You know, there's quite a bit of debate as to what it stands. But to me, it's essentially, you know, a great software engineer, right? So throughout my career, Harshad mentioned some of the companies I've worked at. Throughout my career, there's been a quest to figure out what is a good composition for a team. What are the kind of people you'd like to hire to work with, right? So I'll give you a brief history of some of the things I have worked on. At Informix, I worked on taking a PC-level database management system and redesigning it from the ground up to run on massively parallel systems, which meant re-implementing of several, or actually implementing of several operating system requirements in a Meta OS layer. On top of that, we implemented the parallel database management system. Very successful hardcore systems program. At Oracle, I worked on middleware, the next layer up. Lots of different technologies, lots of interesting things, and today it's known as Fusion middleware, which is the foundation of a lot of Oracle's future technology. At CA, we worked on IT management software, so managing your IT infrastructure, and also the kind of software that it takes to power the cloud. And now I'm at Pay My Trip. So throughout my career, the one commonality that has existed is the fundamentals of software engineering are the same, whether it be in the lowermost part of the stack or in the e-commerce space. The requirements are the same. So going with that, can we go around the room a little bit and talk about what are the qualities of a good software engineer? We're not talking about a 10x software engineer. What kind of things should we look for in a good software engineer? Should I pick on somebody?
I think some fundamentals like the basics of computer science should be strong.
Okay, good.
He or she should be technology agnostic, and should not be tied down to particular technology.
Excellent, excellent. Anybody else?
Like he writes. Who is not just aware of the piece of code he's writing, but the whole product, probably the vision of the product, where it's going to be, how it's going to help them.
Right.
Somebody who writes code for the future. It's like, it's not like that this is the requirement given to him and he will just complete it. Anticipates what can come in the future and adjust that in his assignment.
Right, right. Anybody else? Yes?
Somebody who is ready to learn, intuitive and adaptable.
Excellent.
Somebody who listens to the ecosystem of the technology, which is present today and which will come tomorrow.
Anybody else?
I guess she's like someone who understands the bigger picture and knows where this gets at.
Right. Lots of those things I mentioned. There you go. Right here. So I did a brief search on this, and I think a lot of the points people discuss here are mentioned here. Now, you know, in several of the interviews that I've conducted, I asked people, hey, what's your area of technical interest? In India, a lot of the responses you get are of the form, well, I really like C, but I'm into Java. And my point is, these are languages. What's the technical area you're interested in, right? What would you like to address, right? So the scope of your interest should be beyond the means to achieving whatever technical thing that you'd like to do, right? So somebody mentioned be able to code in other languages. I think that's extremely important. It starts with loves to code. You have to have a passion for the job, right? How do you gauge that? It's very difficult, but I think it's a fundamental requirement of any good software engineer. It's easy to start things. It's very difficult to complete, right? And to do a good job. So getting things done, focus on execution is extremely important. This might sound trivial, but I tell you the number of times you run into people who are really, really good at thinking things, but never getting them done. It's amazing. All of us would like to be continuously refactoring the code. I think this is the nirvana, right? Today's time to market requirements are extremely stringent, so it's difficult to actually do that. But one should regularly be thinking about that so that one can get better. Design patterns are a must. How many of people here are developers and not QA? And how many of you regularly write tests? That's impressive. Typically all the hands go down, right? But it's important to test what you create. Extremely important. That provides a certain amount of discipline. Most software development today involves integration. Building things from the ground up is passé now, right? There's a wealth of open source available and wealth of code within your enterprise that you should leverage rather than trying to do things from scratch. Time to market realities demand that you do something. And it takes great creativity to do that. Writing maintainable code, discipline like putting in comments, trying to have proper documentation so people can take on. All of these things here essentially are the foundation for a good software engineer. Somebody mentioned knows basic computer science. That was there in my web search as well. I was like, what do you mean knows basic computer science? You should know a lot of computer science. But then again, so this is what it takes to be a good software programmer. How do you get from good to great? Good to 10x? Yeah.
What I usually look for in developers is that they want to continuously get better.
Right.
That's the only way you can grow.
Right. Excellent. Anybody else?
Open to learn.
Open to learn? Mm-hmm. Along the same lines as the gentleman, yeah?
Good analytical skills.
Good analytical skills, of course.
In a way, problem solver.
What kind of problem solving?
With whatever your business problem is good at solving those.
Good. Yeah. Excellent.
Very dynamic time. That technology changes very fast, quickly as the market moves.
Excellent. Yep. Anybody else?
As and when he goes, as he keeps going higher, he loves to code more and not, his inclination doesn't go towards.
That's a very important point you're saying, actually. Right. So let's begin with the first one. So these I thought quite a bit about. Some of them might seem funny, but it's extremely important, right? Know yourself. What does this mean? It goes towards the point that you were making, right? You have to take a look at yourself. You have to understand what you're all about, right? You want to actualize yourself. Don't try to be somebody who you are not. After moving to India in 2006, one of the things I encountered was all of the engineers wanted to become managers. Right? And I wanted to understand why. I'm the son of an anthropologist, so it was a very interesting cultural curiosity for me. Why is this? Right? So a lot of social factors are involved in it, right? Your parents don't understand what it means to be a senior engineer, but manager they understand. It's a nice designation, right? And some people came to me and said, "Sir, I need to get married." So societal pressures are there. But actually things are changing. People start understanding. People start all of a sudden understanding the brand you're working for, what it means to be a senior person in that. But one has to understand that not everybody has the aptitude to manage. Management has a lot of mundane, boring things which engineers might not want to tinker with. Correct? So just getting the designation is not the right thing, because unless you have the aptitude, you'll be miserable. Life is short. You should be doing what you enjoy doing. What is your passion? And the typical personality of an engineer is not conducive to management. Right? So you have to just understand who you are, see what makes you tick, give it a shot. But give it a real shot as in you analyze yourself, how well you're doing, and then make the decision. If everybody turns to management, then who'll be writing the code? Huh? Okay. The next is, somebody mentioned here, always thinking of new things, right? You have to have an innovative mindset. Now, innovation is something that people get intimidated about. Right? One of the things with innovation is you can't designate a certain time or a certain group saying, okay, you're going to sit down today and innovate for 2 hours. It doesn't work that way. It's a process of creativity. You can't just sit down and create the next Mona Lisa, right? You have to have inspiration. So, the concept of innovation, what is an innovation, is a very tricky thing, right? Somebody might decide that, hey, today, instead of holding the bottle of water in my right hand, I'm going to hold the bottle in my left hand, because that frees up my right hand to do other things. That might be a very interesting innovation for that person, because it improves the productivity. And who's to say that that's not a good thing to do? When you're writing software, there are lots of processes involved, right? Processes that are outside your code development, things like, the build system, like what are your policies to check in, etc., writing tests. You can innovate in all of those areas. But it's important to be thinking about how you can improve the ecosystem that you're a part of, rather than just be siloed and have your nose to the grindstone. It's this regular thinking, this constant thinking, which will get the creativity up and allow you to become, a bigger contributor to the organization you're a part of. And these ideas, as I mentioned, come from everywhere, right? Almost anything you do as an employee of a company or as an individual, can be an inspiration for ideas. So keep on thinking, make it a part of your culture, your self-culture, your company culture, that innovation is something that everybody does. It's not beyond anybody, and nothing is too small in a piece of innovation. Do people know what this is? iPod, right? So all it took is for you to see a black figure with those white headphones, and you knew it was an iPod. So what was the big innovation here? This is better than the first generation iPod. So it doesn't look
Change
that
of the color of the earphones.
Huh?
Earlier it used to be black color earphones.
So the white colored earphones, okay. What else?
The reduction of the size of the instrument.
The reduction of the size?
Yeah. Initially used to be like quite large, and then they replaced it with something very high.
Okay. What else?
There was a paradigm shift in the way people used to behave with the device, the music player, and the way they've innovated and come up with that.
Right. Right.
It's very personal.
Very personal.
Yeah, personal. It's my idea.
Correct.
Usually, like, it's very famous
Right.
in Europe and everywhere. It's mine.
Correct. Correct. Very important point.
It's integrated, digitally portable. You don't need any more other media to carry your music.
Right.
You can actually create your own playlists and all that stuff, customize it as per your needs.
Excellent.
Not available to
Right.
It has a minimalistic design approach. Instead of too many features, it has features that users care about.
That users care about. Yeah. So now the thing is, the concept of having digital music in a small size entity was not new. It had existed before the iPod. Right? There was a Rio player and several other things, right? The iPod put things all together, and one of the big contributions was the user interface. Minimalist, what is it that you need? Only provide that, nothing more, and make it easy to use. But in my opinion, an even bigger innovation here was the white headphones. Right? All of a sudden, you've created a tremendous marketing appeal just by virtue of something that everybody sees. Right? So all you needed in this picture was just the earphone cords dangling, and you knew it was the iPhone. Right? And this created a phenomenon. The original things cost a lot of money. Right? It was like buying a PC. But since it was small, people went and spent money on it. And everybody around the buses, etc., you would see with these things. And it's just a tremendous phenomenon. So the point there is, lots of innovations went in there, right? And one has to think of innovation in a manner which is beyond one's immediate area of responsibility. Only with that will you get the kind of interesting work that one hopes for. So now, in one's day-to-day work, lots of areas are involved when you're writing code, right? So there is software design. All of us have created very interesting diagrams like this, correct? So software design is extremely important for the 10x program. Along with that is, like we discussed, the user interface design, right? You might have tremendous complexity inside, but what you present to the end customer, right? That has to be something that's really thought of. In addition to all of this, the animations are not working well. In addition to all of this, you also have to understand the business dynamics. What space are you in, right? What is going to be affected by what you're creating? Understand, I think somebody mentioned here, understanding the ecosystem. Who knows what Occam's razor is? Good. It's the latest Gillette thing.
Occam is a old English philosopher. Basically, make things as simple as possible, remove all unnecessary things. If you can remove them and still explain the phenomenon.
Right.
Do that.
Right. So Occam's razor is, I think, extremely important for anybody doing any line of work, right? In our world, it's also known as KISS. Do people know what KISS is, right? Keep it simple, silly, stupid. So here's an example that illustrates it. So you have two people whose goal is to go and buy a pair of pants at the Gap. Right? Both of them go to the mall. Person one goes in and goes to each and every shop, doing all kinds of interesting things, comes and ends up buying the pair of pants, but spending 3.5 hours and around 800 something dollars. Person two, knowing what that person wants, goes and looks up where the Gap is, goes and buys the pants. 6-7 minutes, $33. Right? Both achieve the same goal, but one is more optimal and to the point. Now that's not to say that wandering around the mall is bad, but just use this as an analogy as to what we'd like to do with software. This is something that's related. I always like this quote. It's by Polonius in Hamlet. Right? Brevity is the soul of wit, which is kind of ironical because Polonius always yapped a lot. He was Ophelia's father. I think it takes tremendous effort to come up with something that's simple and easy to understand, and yet does the right work. It's very easy to create complexity. As you get higher and higher in your designations, you become an important commodity in the organization. Several people come to you asking for information, asking for help. Right? You get involved in meetings, etc. This multitasking is part and parcel of what it means to be a senior engineer at any company. You just have to get used to it. Right? Having the luxury of closing your office door or heading home and just sitting in isolation coding, that doesn't really exist. Right? You have to be able to multitask. Being interrupt-driven is fine. Now, this might look silly, but it's extremely important. There's the stereotypical hardcore architect or scientist whose reputation is, a very grumpy person, but absolutely brilliant. Well, that doesn't really work in the software industry or any other engineering firm where you have to cooperate. You have to be easy to work with. You have to be nice, right? You have to understand where the other person's coming. One of the most difficult things in software is having your design go up for review and taking people's criticisms, right? But one has to understand that this is constructive, and taking those into account is going to make overall the product better, right? I can't emphasize this enough. If we were politicians, life would be nice, but we're not. And in our space, by ethics, essentially talks about your attitude towards your delivery. have to take ownership of what it is that you're working for. If something goes wrong with it, you are responsible. Don't finger point, right? It is your creation. Extremely important. And somebody here mentioned being able to learn new things and flexibility, right? Yeah, because you might be quite orthodox about the kind of technologies you'd like to use, the language you'd like to use, the design patterns, etc. But other people might very well have fantastic ideas. Right? You might have people from the business side coming in and giving you ideas. Incorporating those and coming to a mutual solution is the key to success. People know who this person is? It's mentioned down there, but it's in black. You can't see it, but that's what I'm asking. It's Arnold Palmer. He was one of the best golfers ever, pre-Tiger Woods. So a friend of mine, who's an avid golfer, had gone to this big golf resort where Arnold Palmer played. So he was sitting in the restaurant, looking out of a window, and he saw Arnold Palmer on the putting green, practicing his putts for hours. This guy was sitting there having a few beers with his friends. So eventually he went to Arnold and said, well, he asked for an autograph. And he said, why are you doing this? Right? You're such a golfing legend. The guy said, well, this is how I got this way. So no matter how big he got, he kept on practicing. He was called lucky. Everybody thought, oh my goodness, he's so lucky to win this and lucky to win that. And what this quote here says, it's a funny thing. The more I practice, the luckier I get. Along the same lines is something called the 10,000 hour rule. Have people heard of Malcolm Gladwell? The tipping point? Have you read Outline? So I think this was a very, very interesting way to look at what it takes to become really competent at something. Right? It's practice, practice, practice. He analyzed the lives of so many people who become tremendously successful. They could be authors, he talked about Bill Gates. Essentially, it takes 10,000 hours of practice to get to a level where you're really, really good. So the point here is, if you want to hone your craft, do it. Pay a lot of attention to it and keep on doing it. It's only by doing it that you become better. And finally, essentially what I wanted to outline is you've got the basic traits of a good engineer, which we talked about, right? Fundamentals. And beyond that, if you want to get to grade, from my perspective, and I think also from the perspective of the crowd, several things mentioned are here, you need to focus on all of these areas to grow as an individual, to actually make a tremendous contribution, to your field. Now the thing is, does it take a team of all 10x engineers to create a great company or a great product? What I wanted to leave people with is the following. You have to look at what is it that makes a project successful or a company successful. You can't have all Sachin Tendulkars in your cricket team. It'll collapse. Right? You have to think of the composition of the team, and it's only by looking at the composition and trying to figure out what makes a great team that you'll start appreciating the other people. Right? You might be a great hacker, somebody else might be a great tester, somebody might be a great product manager. All of these people together create a great team. A team of all 10x engineers, most likely is going to be a team that's 0x. Okay? So anyway, that's my little spiel to get the conference started. It's been a pleasure. Any questions? Yeah.
So there were a couple of things you mentioned about, one of the points you made is engineers need to take ownership. We need to take ownership.
Yeah.
And they need to get the job done in the proper manner. And the other one you made was practice. I agree that these are really good and essential. In fact, there's no other way. However, I think the opportunity to actually do this is very thin on the ground these days. Because first one, ownership. I don't see too many managements creating the atmosphere to make this happen. In terms of practice, I think it would be true to say that most software engineers, 80% of the time, they spend on something on the lines of bug-fixing or a little enhancement. So they don't really get a chance to practice. I say this also because I met a wide variety I teach restaurant development discipline, and I find a lot of basics in terms of software design are not known to people, simply because they haven't had a chance. And if they have 7 years of experience, they might have done about 1 year of real true design and development, or maybe 2 years at the most. And that would have exposed them to only a few things. But they think they know all that. I mean, they think they know everything. There's a huge amount of experience that's missing.
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the days of creating things from the ground up are gone, right? It's all about integration. And in addition to that, I think people are pigeonholed into various roles, which they are satisfying. And hence the opportunities to practice are less, is what you say.
Not just because they're pigeonholed, but even if you're pigeonholed, let's say, as a developer designer, let's say, you really don't get that much chance to design so many different things, and I mean, variety of things over your, whatever, 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, there's no point in becoming great at 70, right? When you're 70, you have got to become great at maybe mid-30s or something of the sort. And you just really don't have that chance quite often. And that's the problem with practice. There are other ways. I think some people contribute to open source projects and all these skills. I think they're there. But it's not true for. It's a difficulty.
Yeah, it's not easy. But I think if you really want to, there are always opportunities to do interesting things.
I agree.
Right? So there's an easy way out, there's making an effort. And and the other part is, I didn't identify what you practice, right? So if you're satisfying a role, you have to become really good at it. And it's that thing that you practice. In addition to that, to grow in what you're trying to do, you have to keep on learning, which is what you're talking
My
about.
point is, just by doing a role well, however well, is not going to give the sort of practice to make you great,
right,
and make you good.
So that's one aspect of it. You also have to look at growth. Right?
And the ownership, I think management is probably enough.
Depends on
I'm
your.
not saying all management, but most.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to add one point over here. We talk about management not giving ownership. I talked about management not giving ownership.
No, creating an atmosphere where people actually take ownership. And you see, their first engineer needs to see the big picture.
Yes.
Very often that communication is missing. The other thing is when things go wrong, then I don't think there is safety for the individual.
So if you see this new practice, it's not actually new now. The agile practice which people follow, that's meant to get a team commit for a particular feature or product. And if you see the traditional way of the way traditionally the software is developed and now it's developing agile, people know more about the product lines. So that is the environment which is helping. So part of things agile helps. It's not everything which can help make a great 10x team, but it's definitely a start. That's
Let's see that.
So the whole concept of ownership is interesting, right? What exactly do you mean by it? You own all aspects of the product. You own the particular part you're responsible for. As you yourself pointed out, there's a problem. Finger pointing begins, correct? And that's where you come in as a developer. This is my area, and I have ownership of what I'm delivering, not necessarily perhaps complete.
What I meant to say is when you take ownership, very often, I'm not saying all the time, but very often management don't actually support that. They're not conscious of it. And they don't necessarily support it. And it goes into a firefighting mode where the short term, overrides the long term for other, because other engineers are also watching. And they can see what's happening to this guy. So what happens is because you don't have safety, people are always cautious, overly cautious.
Maybe in a way he's trying to point cultural aspect indirectly.
Correct.
But he also tried to mention that a lot of people are into bug fixing and all that. I don't know whether he mean that good ownership opportunity exists only in a new development or also in maintenance or enhancement project. And that's what I would say that that opportunity exists in both areas. It doesn't matter.
No, these are separate points. The fact that you spend most of your time doing maintenance means that you don't have much opportunity to go out and design and see the effect of the design. That's separate. Management ownership is separate.
No, and the other aspect you mentioned is that you don't get an opportunity to do new, innovative, perhaps things because there's so much pressure from management, but restricting your creativity. So all of these things are interrelated, in my opinion, right? But I firmly believe that if If you try, yes you can. Now there might be organizations which are completely, screwed up, and there is no good support from management for you to be able to do things. But there are a significant number of organizations that actually provide a great environment to do all of these things. You just have to try. Yeah.
So as you said, all 10x engineers might not make a perfect team. So is there an ideal, known recipe for an ideal team or a perfect lucky team?
That's a topic for another talk, I think. But it's a complex thing, right? And you have to have team players. You have to have team players, and you have to realize what's a good composition for the team. Not everybody likes to do all kinds of work.
So it will vary depending on my requirements now?
Of course. Of course. What is it that you're trying to do? What kind of people do you need to do that? It depends. The answer is it depends. Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much.